We begin the month of November with two very special days on the church's calendar. November 1st is All Saints' Day, where we honor the saints in heaven and ask for their intercession for us. And November 2nd is All Souls' Day, where we remember in a special way the departed souls in purgatory, and we pray for them to help speed their way into heaven. And that's something that the church asks us to be mindful of doing all throughout the month of November. And this reminder to pray for the dead also serves as kind of an annual memento mori. Memento mori is Latin for remember death. Remember our own death. This is a constant theme of Christian devotion. It's a very traditional theme. You may have seen it depicted in art. If you've ever seen a picture of a saint sitting at his desk, studying or writing, and there's a skull sitting on the corner of the desk looking at him. Or a saint in prayer, kneeling down before a crucifix maybe, and then there at his or her feet will be a skull. And you may have thought, well, what's that skull doing there? Isn't that a little morbid or grotesque? But it's a memento mori. It's a reminder of death, that one day we will share that same fate, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And we don't know when that day will come, so we should always be ready. And that's the message of our gospel reading for this Sunday. It's from the beginning of Matthew chapter 25, and it's when Jesus gives us the parable of the wise and foolish virgins. There's 10 virgins he describes to us, and they're waiting for the arrival of a bridegroom. They're part of a wedding party, and they don't know when the bridegroom is coming. So the 5 wise virgins are prepared. They're ready. They have their lamps. Their lamps are full of oil. They're set. They're ready to go. But the 5 foolish virgins are not prepared. They have no oil for their lamps. And so they have to go and find a merchant and try and buy their oil. And while they're gone, the bridegroom comes and they miss him. That coming of the bridegroom is a metaphor for our own death, when Christ, our bridegroom, will come to welcome us into that eternal wedding banquet in heaven. And we don't want to miss out. We don't want to be like those foolish virgins who are unprepared for that day. And that's the importance of the memento mori, the remembrance of our own death. St. Francis de Sales wrote an introduction to the devout life, his great master work, and it's meant as a helpful aid for Christians to lead a life of devotion. And one of the first things that he says we should do in that book is to make a prayerful meditation on our own death, mindful of the fact that we don't know when it will happen. So we can use our imaginations, and this is what he directs us to do, to use our imaginations to do kind of a guided meditation. He says that we should imagine what our death might be like, considering the fact that we don't know when it will come. Maybe it will happen today. Maybe it will happen tomorrow. It might happen many, many years from now. What would it be like if we died in the winter? If we died in the summer? Will we be awake when we die? Will we be asleep? Will death come suddenly to us, or will we have time to prepare? Will there be a priest there at our side to anoint us, to hear our final confession? We don't know. We don't know the answer to any of these questions, but we can imagine what our death might be like. And then from the perspective of that moment of our death, he says we should consider all the different ways that we've passed our time in this life. Consider our occupations, our amusements. What significance will they have in that moment? How important will all of our acts of love and charity seem to us then? How unimportant will all of our acts of selfishness seem? He says we should imagine our soul saying goodbye to all the things of this life. Goodbye to all of our possessions, saying goodbye to our family and friends, and finally saying goodbye even to our own bodies that'll be laid in the grave and left to decay. Who, St. Francis asks, in this world will remember you 1 year after you die? Who will remember you 10 years after you die? A century after you die? Will there be anyone left on this earth who will remember you 1,000 years after you die? How insignificant this world seems compared to eternity. But finally, after we die, St. Francis says we should consider the fact that our soul will take one of two paths. It will either go to join the Lord in heaven, or it will go to be eternally apart from him in hell. Which path will your soul take? It can only be the path that it's begun in this life, because after death, there's no change of direction. And that's the significance of this life. We can still change direction in this life. So the purpose of this guided meditation is to lead us to a resolution to live a life of detachment of the things of this world, not because they're evil, but because they're temporary. We're going to have to let them go one day, sooner or later. We don't know when, but we're going to have to let them go. So we should be ready to do that at any time. And because we don't know when God will call us from this world, we should always live life ready to leave this world behind in a state of God's grace, in a state of God's friendship, avoiding mortal sin. And if we do fall into sin, repenting immediately and reaching out and grabbing hold of God's mercy in the sacrament of confession. If we do this, if we live each day mindful of our own death as that memento mori, then death for us is not anything morbid. It's not anything grotesque. It's not anything to be fearful of, because we know that death is just that final step in our journey to Christ, that final union that we will have with Christ, who himself suffered death for our sake. Confident in that knowledge, confident in that sure hope that the journey that we've begun in this life towards God will be brought to completion in the life to come. We should live each day as if it will be our last, because one day it will be. Praise be Jesus Christ.